There's some areas in the gravel world that I think newcomers make a massive mistake in.
I think it's nominal. I don't think most people are going to notice it because it's just going to cause a bigger issue. Most people I see who don't enjoy their first gravel race, it's because they flatted and didn't know how to fix it or didn't have the correct stuff to fix it.
What's the best way to corner on gravel or to learn how to bring speed in for somebody new who's coming from road into gravel?
So this is what I was waiting for, because I think this is the hardest thing from going from road to gravel or mountain bike. It changes a lot. I think the first thing is learning. It's hard to know that without doing it. And so I kind of tell people like, oh, your tire's gonna wear out? Cool. Stab with a pair of scissors and practice plugging it. It's hard to do and it's frustrating. Did it at Big Sugar last year. I raced on 15 PSI the whole day because that was the only way I could stay in contact and keep my second place in the Grand Prix. Wasn't what I wanted to do, but there's a
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Anthony. I'm a former lawyer turned cyclist turned podcast host who's based in Ireland. My goal with this channel is to introduce you to the people and to the ideas to help you optimize your health, your happiness and your longevity. Are you curious about gravel cycling? I know a lot of people are, but they're not sure where to start. Or maybe you've tried gravel cycling, but you feel like there's something missing, some insider knowledge. Well, do I have a treat for you today, because joining me is Alexey Vermeulen. He's a cycling powerhouse who's done it all. Road, mountain bike, and yes, gravel cycling. This guy's even raced at World Tour level with the dominant team in the world right now, Jumbo-Visma. So you can bet he knows a thing or two about the world of cycling. In this epic conversation, Alexey and I were going to decode the world of gravel cycling for you. You can think of this as a gravel cycling 101, but from somebody who's been there, who's in the trenches literally. We'll be sharing tips, tricks and hacks that Alexey wishes he knew when he started out his own gravel cycling journey. Now before I jump into this conversation, I do have one small favour to ask. Still around 90% of people watching these videos haven't subscribed. If you could take 1 second before the show starts and subscribe, as the more the channel grows, the bigger the guests will get. This is the Roadman Cycling Podcast. Now, my dear friends, it's Alexey Vermeulen. Alexey, welcome back to the Roadman Cycling Podcast.
Hey, good to be back. Excited to be here.
Is this second, third time?
I think it's second. We chat a lot about doing podcasts, but then you don't want me on. You have on bigger fish. I come second or third or fourth.
There's no one bigger in the gravel game, my friend.
I don't know. Once you get beat by Keegan by 25 minutes, you might not agree with that. But no, I'm happy to be back.
There's some areas in the gravel world that I think newcomers make a massive mistake in. I know when I was moving into gravel, I made huge mistakes. And as one of the best gravel riders in the world, my goal for this conversation is to get you to help me smooth that transition for riders when they're coming across from road into gravel, because we all know gravel is meant to be inclusive, but that barrier sometimes is the tech hurdle. So I'm going to hit you a little bit rapid fire with some questions as to what people can do to smooth that transition. When we're out on the road, I've learned that you need to have a degree of self-sufficiency. So what are you putting into your saddlebag on a ride?
So that changes race to training ride. I think I'll start with training ride because I think that's helpful. Training ride almost always have a pump and two CO2s. CO2s can put a seated tire back on, but otherwise try to use a pump so you always have them. At least one tube, if not two. And then multi-tool, quick link, and some plugs. Usually about it.
That's it?
Yeah, maybe a tire lever.
Multi-tool can fix chain brake as well?
Yep.
And if you're at home, I know there's a culture that's like everyone likes to bring their bike to the bike shop, but what's the absolute must know how to do pieces of bike maintenance?
I think the most important part of being out alone on gravel is anything tire related. So fixing a tire completely or reseating a tire, or if you have inserts inside, being able to even get the tire off. It's a lot different, a lot harder. It's a different technique to plugging the tire without even, needing to put a tube in.
It's interesting. What I'm seeing with a lot of roadies coming across is they say, oh yeah, I'm running tubeless. And there's a young lad that trains with me and he'll know who he is listening to this. we all met up, go for a gravel ride. He's a roadie. He takes a line of his dad's gravel bike for the day. And he's like, I'm running tubeless. We hit like the local park. We haven't even hit the local trails. We hit the local park and he flats. And he takes off his tire. Like the tubeless was in there. The sealant must have been like 2 years old. It's totally dry. People don't realize that sealant isn't one and done. It's not like, oh, I'm running tubeless. That's it. I never have to do anything again. There's a process of topping this back up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's a good point. I mean, so I use all sealants are a little bit different based on what they're made of. But I use orange sealant. They really say 2 to 3 months max. They have an endurance sealant that lasts around that 3 months. If I'm going to a race, it's always being checked. And I would say I'm trying to check tubeless at least once a month, just see how much sealant's in there. Sometimes you can listen for it. Sometimes you can just say, I'm just going to add some in.
Is there a rotating weight penalty to adding extra sealant in?
I think it's nominal. I don't think most people are going to notice it. I think to a point there is. There's also it's trying to figure out how much sealant you need to completely coat your tire. That's a new tire. And then once you have that, have a little bit left to go and hopefully seal a hole. For what most of us do, I don't think you need to worry about it at all. I'd say the more the merrier to a point. Like if you're going to do any normal gravel tire, I'd say putting in between 3 up to 4 ounces. It's a lot, but you have to stress a little less and it's going to last a little longer.
And are you unseating the tire, cleaning out the old sealant and topping up new sealant, or are you just literally pouring new sealant into the valve?
It depends. So like if it's been sitting, if we're talking like 6 months to 2 years, like 100% clean it out, because it's just going to cause a bigger issue. There's now a company like Silka makes a sealant remover, which makes life super simple. Just spray it in there, leave it for a minute, and then wipe it out. But for the most part, I'm probably just throwing it in the valve, and I'm probably, the way I ride bikes, I'm probably wearing tires out before the sealant's going dry.
Pro problems.
I just leave it running. I give it to other people to ride.
So if you're heading out the door, one of the most intimidating things I found is, especially in my first year gravel riding, it's like, where the hell do I go? Because we don't have routes signposted like we do on the road where everyone's sharing routes. Is there any apps you found useful? Komoot, Strava, All Trails, or is it just local knowledge?
I think I still will always love people, like word of mouth on where to go find trails. For me, Strava heat maps have been by far the most helpful, because people really can't hide stuff. They pretend like, oh, it's a secret trail. But if you really get in deep, you can see those little lines. I used to use Komoot a lot more in Europe. I don't know why. I haven't used it as much in the US. But I feel like, right now it's almost always Strava. It gives a good estimate for how long it's going to take me just based on my last 4-week average. And it's an easy way to kind of plan rides and go adventure.
Komoot has brought me on some absolutely wild rides. Like it must have been Sven Tuft out exploring in Girona, and I picked up his Komoot trail because you're riding like a nice gravel route on the side of Rocker, and then all of a sudden you're hiking with a bike on your back up a waterfall or something. You're like, who is doing this ride? Yeah.
No, it's definitely, you got to find that middle ground. And that's kind of why I like Strava, because based on how blue that line is, or how many times the heat map's been ridden, you kind of see, okay, how many people are riding this, and just gives you an idea.
There's almost a burgeoning industry of gravel touring here, because I find it really difficult to tell my friends, it's like, go past the downed logs and take the second log on the left. Like, you don't have many landmarks when you're out there.
I pretty much just have like a 1 hour, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 4, 5 hour rides that I'm like, hey, if someone's coming to town, I have this on Strava, I can just send it to them. It'll be easy. Just starts from downtown, they can move the start wherever they want. They know, it's all my favorite parts based on how long they're going.
Another massive transitionary thing I had to get used to was coming from the road, especially when I was riding full time. I was in with a training group who were some old school pros, and they had maybe a regrettable habit, definitely now the way trends have gone around fueling and 120 grams of carbs per hour, where if we were doing like a 6-hour ride, you would just have breakfast and then you would ride for 3 hours and stop the calf after 3 hours and then ride 3 hours home. Like, there'd be no fueling strategy whatsoever in these rides.
Yeah.
But you can't get away with that in gravel. So are you bringing top tube bags? How are you fueling on these spins?
Yeah, I mean, you'll actually love the person I was talking to about this the other day. I was at SBT doing a ride, and I was talking to Nico Roach about this. I think our bodies have, whether you're eating a lot or whether you're eating nothing, your body changes. Gravel, the way it's raced, should be a more higher fuel setup. But like when I came to the road in 2015, 2016, you got made fun of if you had a gel in the first hour. Like you were the dweeb. You were like you didn't do that. But yeah, now it's definitely like it's easier because there's a lot of companies that are making ways to do that. You're not carrying 14 bars. So for me, it's usually I'll do almost half to a little more in my bottles. So it keeps it busy. So I'm doing a training ride. Say I'll bring 2 big bottles, 1 water, maybe 1 super concentrated with a full hour of fuel, bring another bag of mix in my pocket or something. And then the rest of it is usually just a mix of stuff. And it's usually all in my back pockets. I occasionally do like a handlebar bag when I'm training if I have a lot of long stuff. But I've never been a big like top tube bag guy. I don't know, just the way it looks. I still slam my bars, so maybe that's the issue. It just doesn't come out looking well.
Yeah,
but,
so you're still a roadie.
Yeah. But
have you played around with homemade bars?
What's that?
Have you played around with making your own bars, like homemade alternatives to commercial bars?
No, I think I have to. The nice thing, like working with the feed, I have too many options. Like I never have any complaints. I feel like if I was with one, like a certain company, like I used to do a lot of like scratch rice cakes, when like Alan and Bijou came out with the portables book, like I used to do like how many different versions of this can I make in the week? But yeah.
I've got addicted to Alan Murchison. I'm not sure if you have his cookbook. Alan Murchison has this pancake recipe in his cookbook. Oh my God, I'm addicted to it. It's like 2 of them before a medium ride, 3 of them before a super long ride. You're golden.
It's great. I love that book. The recipes are really fucking complicated.
Do you think so?
Yes.
My girlfriend's been making them, so I can't
They're
say.
really, you go and you're like, I don't have this shit in my house. Like you have to like be looking for some of this stuff. Like I don't know exactly the pancake one, but I like every time I go to that cookbook, like I'm like, I don't think I have this.
Well, I was like that with the pancake one. I had to go out and literally buy like a year's supply of pancake stuff. So now I got my flaxseed and all down. Because I'm not using flaxseed day to day. But you're not going with hydration packs or anything funky like that? For
long races, I do. Yeah, I mean, my brand's having a dog on my back. So I got to have that. I got to have that going, can of hydration pack. No. I'd rather stop at a cafe or stop at a coffee shop, stop at a gas station.
Did you have any crashes yet out training with the dog on your back?
No. Obviously there's always an opportunity for that, but it's mainly on the mountain bike. Like it would have to be, I ride so differently with him on the back that it would have to be like really, really bad luck for something to happen.
Yeah, like total freak one. Speaking of the mountain bike and stuff, when we're moving in from road into off-road pursuits, something that's very unsettling is the feeling of the ground moving under you when you're going through a corner. You're just used to having that solid contact point with the ground on the road. And then we get into off-road and we don't really have that. What's the best way to corner on gravel or to learn how to bring speed in for somebody new who's coming from road into gravel?
Yeah. So this is what I was waiting for, because I think this is the hardest thing from going from road to gravel or mountain bike. It changes a lot. I think the first thing is learning your tires and your PSI. Like if you still have tubes in, or if you have tubeless, you have to run very different tire pressures. Once you kind of figure out what you enjoy at different tire pressures for different terrains, it's a little easier to dial in how you want to feel, right? Are you someone who leans the bike over pretty well? That means most tires are going to work for you. If you're not someone who leans the tire all the way over to find that edge, then you're probably going to need something that has some grip from the middle of the tire out. So I think one of the first ways to learn is first to understand that when you're cornering on a gravel bike compared to a road bike, you're not going to have consistency. And that's the fastest way to go through the corner, to be honest. There will be a little bit of sliding sideways if you're doing it right. It's about placing your front wheel correctly. And I am like speaking as a professional, but I'm still very much learning. And then it's about setting up that corner quite differently, right? On the road, you can occasionally miss the apex and still make it. On a gravel bike, if you're ripping and you miss the apex, you're pretty screwed. And you're pretty much just going to go straight.
Let me take a second to talk about today's show sponsor, because I've something really exciting to share with you. It's a game changer that's been making a noticeable difference in my performance recently, especially when it comes to sleep. allow me to introduce you to Pillar. While we're all familiar with the importance of electrolytes and carbohydrates in our race preparation, Pillar is taking a different route. It's focusing on something called micronutrition, ensuring that you're ready to perform even before you ever hit the start line. It's all about promoting a good night's sleep, facilitating effective recovery, and replenishing those crucial micronutrients so you can perform at your best. Over the past month, I've been incorporating Pillar's triple magnesium supplement into my routine. I take it every evening, about 30 minutes or so before bed, and I've seen a remarkable improvement in my sleep quality. I've been tracking my sleep with my Whoop device, and the results, they're there every morning when I wake up in black and white. I'm waking up with about a 10% improvement in my restorative sleep. I'm waking up feeling refreshed. Having had that deep restorative sleep, I'm now ready to attack work, training, and life the next day. But don't just take my word for it. Let the data from your fitness tracker tell the story. So if you're ready to elevate your performance and the quality of your sleep, why not give Pillar a try? Head over to pillarperformance.shop and use the code ROADMAN on your local website for 15% off your first order. Or for US listeners, if you head over to defeed.com/pillar and use code ROADMAN for the same 15% off your order. The details of this offer are in the description below. Now back to the show. It's interesting, and you touched on pressure as well, because on a gravel bike without suspension, I know there's some people now rocking specialized suspension systems and things, but generally we don't have suspension. So lower tire pressure also acts as our suspension on the gravel bike as well to make the ride a little bit more comfortable. So what are the considerations when you're judging grip versus suspension versus terrain versus body weight? Do you have a calculation you do? Do you use an online calculator?
No, I mean, I do. I like the Silica tire calculator and the NV tire. They have kind of a table that I really like. I kind of go between those because I think they play very differently based on what you're riding and how much you weigh. I think it's harder in the heavier you weigh because pinch flatting is probably the biggest issue in gravel. But for me, it's usually starting with, okay, what's the race like and where is it going to be won? So am I going to risk it for this one section so I can have a better finish? So like, I guess the easiest way is through actually staying tire pressure. So I weigh about 64 to 65 kilos. I will consistently move between the lowest, probably at 28 PSI in the front, 30 rear, up to maybe 33, 35. And these are all starting pressures because you have to expect with most of these races starting early, you're going to gain 2 PSI with pressure or with going up in altitude and having the temperature go up.
That was something I never figured. I had Sofia Gomez on the podcast talking about this, and I never figured that at all.
Yeah. And it changes when you're talking about like 2 PSI difference. It's a lot. If you're starting at 35 and it ends up at 37, it's a hard tire. And then my other thing that I just learned, and I think I want to harp on, is skinnier is not always faster on gravel. Like I will almost always go with the bigger tire that is a little more suspension and just gives you a little more cushion because I think for the most part, it's also faster.
Is there a point where it's not faster? Like, is there diminishing marginal returns? I'm running the 47 Pathfinders, and they're pretty much the biggest tire I can get into my Factor off-stroke gravel bike. But is there, if you go from a 47 to a 49, do you think that's faster again? At some point, it has to not be.
When you're really racing, like all of our races still have asphalt, right? So there's not a full, like, not like the Traca, where most of our races have some asphalt inside. I don't think I would ever go past a 45. And I've raced a 45 once this year. So I think most of the time for me, it's between a 40, 42 is the fastest. There's a lot of guys who are like, oh, should I run a 35? I'm like, you should run a 40.
Interesting, because Dylan Johnson reckons, I had him on the potty a couple of months back, he reckons 47's faster almost on every conditions, including asphalt.
Yeah, and this is where Dylan and I disagree about a lot of things. I think there's things to be tested by yourself. There's things to be tested equipment-wise, and then you also have to remember that gravel is not, the way we are racing gravel is not gravel to be ridden. Riding 47s, I think, spectacular. Racing 47s, I don't know there's much value to be gained because you are at the whim of someone ahead of you. So if someone ahead of me has let's use Keegan, for example, right? And we're at Unbound, and he has a bigger gear than me. He's running a 50-10, and I have a 50-11. It's a bigger gear, and a faster tire, because I do think no matter what you say, aerodynamics wise and rolling resistance, if you're running gravel pressures, a skinnier tire is going to be faster on asphalt. Yeah, I have to keep up with him. It's not my choice. I don't get to ride my pace. I'm racing Keegan. So in that term, I don't think you can always say, I do believe that the 47 is faster if you have a very consistent test.
It's interesting because the road tires are getting wider and wider as well. And it's like, we're going to meet somewhere in the middle. There's not that much difference between my gravel tires and my road tires now.
Yeah, and that's where I think like pretty much the road tires are gonna cap out at like 30s. Most of the Tour de France teams are back on 28s, 30s, and you're going to have. I don't think gravel's going to start going below 38s. I think there's going to be a tiny gap in the middle. It's pretty much useless unless you're like, I just want cushion, and that's where I think like the 47, 49 and the 35s, 32s are just going to be used, for either high end road or high end gravel when you just want to go train and have fun.
There's been so much innovation around this. Like when I was racing full time, I was racing 21s, 140 PSI, regardless of the conditions. You might let 5 PSI out if it was pouring rain, but that was it. Now I'm running 30s on 65 PSI on the GP 5000 tubeless ones. And that's the recommended pressure off Silka's website. And they rock.
Yeah. Yeah, it's changed. I mean, I still like the only time I ran tubulars at Road Nats this year, 24 millimeter tubulars. It's a crazy feeling to get back on them. Like I was just like, holy shit. And they rip. They are so fast. But you could never take them anywhere off road.
I miss gluing tubular tires. That was like, there was something romantic about it. I used to pour myself a nice glass of red wine and just pull the glue out. And I don't know, I kind of missed that. It was like old school.
Gluing, yes. Taking old glue off, I'd never have to do again. I'd be happy.
Descending is another area, and I didn't even realize this was a skill until I went graveling with a friend who can't front wheel, like bunny hop, lift his front wheel. It was ridiculous how many crashes he had. I didn't even realize I'd done this. It's just like, you're riding a bike since a kid and you see an obstacle, you're like, well, that's going to throw me over the handlebar. So you just intuitively lift your front wheel to clear it. He didn't have this skill because he didn't ride as a kid. And it was insane how many times he hit the ground over a 2-day period on a bike packing trip. Is there any other skills like that you're like, they're essential if you're going to come across the gravel?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the way from what you're talking about, like coming from the road, I think one of the biggest issues for people is just having too much power for the skill they have on a gravel bike.
Yeah, that's good.
Like for me, that was the biggest issue. I just power out of every corner. That's not how you go fastest. You still get dropped somehow that way. So learning how to control speed and learn what speed you should be going into corners. Seeing lines is very different. So I think any of the little things that you have to learn, I'll harp on fixing tires again, because that one will suck and you'll be stuck somewhere with no service somewhere. So being able to plug tires, understanding that a lot of gravel is encountering things you haven't otherwise encountered. And so figuring out either how you're riding over them or how you're getting through them is important. And then lastly, I think is just preparing nutritionally. I don't think it's all tech bike skills. Like I think bike skills will come if you ride. It's just about not riding too fast and learning as opposed to just trying to rip through and ending up on the other side of the road.
Yeah, I heard someone describing gravel as just this constant fixing problems. So encounter a problem, solve a problem, encounter a problem, solve it, move forward. And it's a pretty good analogy, especially if you do like a multi-day gravel events where although I carry plugs around for a long time, first time I ever used one was like 6 months ago. And it's a weird feeling because you're making the hole in your tire bigger to fix it. And you're like, this looks like it's making the problem worse, not better. So it's definitely one to play around with.
One to play around with. And there's also like, obviously at the racing edge, there's 4 or 5 different plug types in my opinion. Honestly, I'll almost always carry all of them because you are encountering different holes, right? And so you have to be able to look at a hole, know what kind of plug you're using. If it fits well, I can plug a tire and keep racing without ever having to fill it up again. Did it at Big Sugar last year. I raced on 15 PSI the whole day because that was the day I could, like, that's the only way I could stay in contact and keep my second place in the Grand Prix. Wasn't what I wanted to do, but it's hard to know that without doing it. And so I kind of tell people like, oh, your tire's going to wear out. Cool. Stab it with a something sharp, stab with a pair of scissors and practice plugging it. Because it's hard to do, and it's frustrating when you're out alone, or especially when you're in a race and it's just people are flying by you and there's air and sealant spraying out, and it's a lot.
So you mentioned there's different types of plugs. I didn't even know that. The only plugs I have are the little strip ones that you stab into it. Yep. So what is there different sizes or diameters of them, or how does it work?
Different sizes, diameters of those. So most of the guys' favorite in the US that they use is those, the Genuine Innovation ones, but they're small plugs. They are not, you don't make your hole bigger. You just try to shove it in no matter what it is. Sometimes you put 2 in, they're the quickest. They're super light. They're on it's what you see on all of our cables, and you just like rip it off, stick it in, and hopefully you go. They make bigger diameter version of that. Like Lezyne makes some, Blackburn makes some, a couple others that are just bigger, and sometimes you have to make a hole for those. Then from there is Dynaplugs, which I like. Dynaplugs, and the next version for me, Stands, can be hard because if you have to put a tube in, you have to go find all the plugs and take them out because they can flat your tube because they have pointy ends.
That's a pain,
so
yes.
It's just remembering, but those are the best at filling big holes. So
and what about slits?
Slits, you're kind of fucked. I mean, Unbound, like I carry like duct tape and stuff. You can put duct tape on the inside of the tire. You're taking the tire off. You're refixing. A lot of if you see a lot of my training bikes, there's just a bunch of duct tape around the seat post. Like if I really get into a thing and I just want to get out of it without calling, you can do it. Slits, the same thing though. If you're gonna, you're not really like Unbound would carry super glue. Like occasionally that works, but you got to get lucky. There's a lot going on. If it's wet and there's sealant everywhere and you're trying to super glue something, it's probably just going to break again.
Yeah, because I've had slits on the sidewall that I haven't been able to fix, and I've had to call for a lift with them.
Yeah. So if you can do imagine you put a couple plugs in and it's close and it's just coming out a little bit in between, that's where super glue can help, and you can get it by with a slit.
Interesting. So I nearly throw that back into our first question where I throw duct tape and super glue back into the saddlebag.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I probably would only be carrying those on the explorative adventure rides. Yeah. But once you're out there, I don't want to have to call for help. I just want to listen to my podcast and be out in the woods. So
even trying to call for help, I drove over with my girlfriend to a trail. She's trying to get into gravel biking. So we drove across the city to a trail. It's pretty remote, as most trails are. We rode the trail, had a lovely ride, and the keys to the car obviously bounced out of my pocket at some point on the trail. So we got back to the car. The car was open. I forgot to lock it as well. So I just had a total nightmare of a day. Car's open. We're sitting in the car. I'm like, have you got the keys? She's like, no. Have you got the keys? No keys. Anyway, boring story short, I have to call my dad, who was old school. And I was like, I'll drop you a pin and I'll tell you where I am. And he's like, how do you mean drop me a pin? What the fuck is dropping the pin? Just tell me where you are. And I was like, I can't direct you. It's the middle of a forest. I don't know how to direct you. This was a 4-hour screaming match on the phone. Me saying, just use the pin. Just use the pin I'm sending you. It was brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the biggest thing is I don't think there isn't really a good way. I mean, obviously guys are taking out, radios and different transmitters at this point. But yeah, I mean, I'm try to be self-sufficient is the goal.
And shoes. I'm seeing this trend with, obviously when you come across the gravel, you assume you're using gravel or mountain bike pedals and shoes, but there's a trend where you're seeing more gravel guys racing in road shoe, row pedal setups. What's your consideration here? How much walking is in, I guess, or is there an aero consideration?
Walking in mud. I think the benefit in using road shoes is this is a bigger platform, right? Mountain bike races have never been 6 to 10 hours, and all of a sudden they are, and just avoiding hot spots on your feet, trying to just have a bigger platform to put power down with. Mountain bike shoes are great because you can always clip in no matter what. You step in, clay, you can still clip in. Road shoes are not that way. But I would say the reason you see it trend toward that is okay, is it a dry race without much walking? Road shoes going to be a great option.
Did you use gravel or road shoes on Leadville?
Leadville, I use mountain bike shoes.
Interesting. And for somebody that's heading into their first event, is there any advice you'd give them? Because it's vastly different from the road setup that people are accustomed to. It's, it is fun, it's inclusive, it's a really good laugh, but it's totally different as well. So it can be a little intimidating.
Yeah, we're going to keep coming back to this self-sufficiency thing. Like most people I see who don't enjoy their first gravel race, it's because they flatted and didn't know how to fix it or didn't have the correct stuff to fix it. There's a lot of these little things we've all talked about, whether it's plugs and changing tires and all that stuff. Either if it's just watching YouTube videos, do that and make sure you have like the right length valve. Like a lot of us are running carbon deep dish wheels on gravel bikes now. The only people I encounter who have a gravel valve like this, because it's how they're all made, that doesn't work. So just, even if be prepared and go double check everything. And then I guess last is like make sure you have the course on your computer, because that's usually the second most common problem is getting off course.
And does the spirit of gravel exist? Can people find this? Can they harness it?
I don't think you can harness it. I think it's just a feeling. You feel involved or you don't. I think it's easy from the road to feel like it has to be competitive. I think it's a beautiful part about gravel is it doesn't have to be competitive because it is so vastly different. But that being said, like the reason it's growing is because everybody can take on their own race. It's very Ironman-esque, I feel like.
I kind of to finish up for you looking at next season. We're coming towards the end of the race season this year. I know you have a few events still left, but Keegan seems to be the dominant force again. How good is Keegan, and is he beatable next year? Big winter for you?
Yeah, I don't know. We race very differently. Since I left the road, I've never put everything back into the bike. Like I put a lot of my time in, but I also have a lot of things outside that I've focused on. Keegan right now is not beatable. He is that good. He's leaves no stone unturned equipment wise, testing, different fueling strategies, pushing the limits of what we can do. Like all of us are racing SBT, which is 142 miles with all the liquid we need because of Keegan, right? I wouldn't say that's fun or possible, but Keegan made a statement last year that you can go win that race. And that is gravel racing. It's being able to take on everything and not have to stop. I didn't enjoy carrying 13 pounds of water, but that's what it took to be on the podium at SBT. And so I think finding those lines and limits, to me is still fun and interesting. And right now, Keegan's the best at all of it. He's the best at riding his bike up and downhill, and he's the best at doing the rest of it.
When you look ahead for yourself, are you motivated to be less rounded of a person in pursuit of that marginal gains to close that gap to Keegan?
Yeah, I mean, we're in different races right now. Not even different. It's not a gap. I mean, Leadville is 25 minutes. So I think just remembering that I enjoy riding my bike and finding I definitely have moments where I'm like, I'm going to put it all in for this next month or 2 month period. But it's never going to be a 10-month goal for me again. I am very competitive, but I also when I left the World Tour, I kind of tried to leave part of that behind. I tried to leave the ego behind. And so when I line up, I'll be as ruthless as I can. But the days before and everything after, I would rather be involved in someone having a good experience in their first gravel race than I would win it myself.
Alexey, I love this conversation. I think it's going to be so helpful for people easing that transition from road into gravel. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on.
If you enjoyed this episode, please click up here for another conversation, which I know you're going to love. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on some amazing upcoming guests that I have planned. See you next day.